That's the introduction to a work called Morgun by Kenley Kristofferson. And that will be premiered this weekend with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra as part of their finale to the Nordic Festival. And Kenley is a Winnipegger, born in Gimli, and he's a freelance composer, focuses on choral and instrumental works for various ensembles. He teaches music and English at the Lord Selkirk Regional Comprehensive Secondary School, specifically jazz, music history, band, and composition. And he's in the studio with me this morning to chat about his background and about this exciting weekend. Good morning, Kenley.
Good morning, Michael.
Thanks for joining me this morning.
Thanks for having me.
It was on short notice. We just finalized things yesterday, so I'm very glad you could make it down. And this early morning, appropriately named morning.
Yes.
So before we talk about the weekend, because it's obviously a very exciting weekend for you, tell us a little bit about your background in music and how you became a composer.
Absolutely. I grew up in Gimli and was a band kid, so I played trumpet for the first bit of my band career, and then went to euphonium, and I somehow got into university on euphonium, which was really cool. I'm really grateful. I mean, I worked really hard, but I don't think I was quite at the level as everyone else. When I got there, I mean, I'd never heard people play music like they did at the U of M, and it's an amazing school. I'm really happy I got to go there, and from there I continued to explore, I guess, the music of my youth, which would be video game music. Strangely,
it's my son loves video game music too.
Yeah, definitely.
Great stuff.
And well, it's the music that we attach ourselves to as kids, because we're so engaged with the medium, right? Like when we're playing it, we take control of the character, we live in that environment, and music is part of that environment. And especially like when I was small, I was into the first Nintendo and then Super Nintendo. And what was really interesting about that is that the composers were not making it up as they went along, but they were discovering the art as they went along. Every new technological advancement that happened put them at the cutting edge. And so as I was growing up, I was learning more about this music, and I was engaged and really emotionally invested in this music. That when I went to compose, my first thought was like, oh, I want to write music for video games. And then strangely, it actually happened. Winnipeg has a really great independent gaming community, and now like a general game development community too. So companies like Foul Moon and Complex Games have been really great to me by giving me a lot of work, but allowing me to work on their projects, which I mean are really close to them too. We're all making art together, and so it started small, like Facebook games, and now we're into iOS games and mobile games for franchises like Betty Boop, Warhammer, DuckTales for Disney, which was really cool. So there's been a lot of really great opportunities, and then from there into concert music, choral music, and the orchestra.
Mm-hmm. So what is it about video game music that really captured your attention? I mean, does it tell a story? It's full of emotion, I know, because I've heard some of it. I'm not a video gamer myself, but when I've heard the music, it's I guess the only word I could say is kind of epic. It's very powerful.
It is really powerful, and it has the opportunity and the ability to say things that concert music couldn't say in that medium. It's very medium specific, especially when you look at the early music from the NES, from the first Nintendo, where there were only four channels of audio. You get a static channel, which is your drums, that like, which was drums or snare and bass, and you get a triangle wave, which was the bass, and then two square waves, and that's all you got. You only ever had four instruments at the same time. So the composers would try and write these epic scores using only four wave patterns, not even like an oboe or a French horn. It was a squiggly line on a screen, and they had to make it up as they went along. They were discovering how to write for that, which was so inspiring and interesting. Mm-hmm. And then when the Super Nintendo came out, they had 8 instruments that were sampled. So now you could get flutes and oboes and French horns, and you could start to access that sphere of I guess like music that exists in the real world.
So, other than video game music, your background is Icelandic? You were telling me off air that your parents and your grandparents are all from Iceland. Are you influenced by that heritage of music at all?
A bit, yeah. My great grandparents actually immigrated from Iceland, and my mom's side grew up in Arborg, and my dad's side grew up in Gimli, and the interesting thing about Iceland is very similar to the Winnipeg experience of making art, is that it is a very isolated place. And we also spoke off air a little bit about how like Winnipeg is, it's not like Vancouver or Toronto where there are cities all around you. There's wheat all around us, and wheat and cold. So the art experience of Winnipeg is very interesting, and the same is true with Iceland. Is their arts community is vibrant, and Matthew Patton, who works for the symphony, has also said this too, that isolation is an important part of making art, not only personally, like pencil and paper by candlelight at the piano, but as a culture of art making, and they've really allowed a lot of their music to develop a national character. I think because it's not as influenced as other things. It's different now with the internet, but for a solid 150 years, when they started to really push forward in the classical music area around where nationalism started to take place in the Romantic era, they've made some really interesting art, and it's translated into what the WSO has been doing at their Icelandic Fest in 2002 at the New Music Festival, the Nordic Festival here. You'll hear that it sounds really different. So in my art making, it's been the ability to look around you, but also to look inside, right? To look inward. So like Winnipeg is an incredible art scene, incredible music scene, incredible music education scene, and I think isolation is part of that.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the WSO this weekend. You were commissioned, I should say, to write a piece for this finale. Mm-hmm. And it's to commemorate the 125th anniversary of the Icelandic people in Gimli. How did you go about writing a piece like that?
It was hard. Let's
leave it at that.
No, it's a lot of pressure because it's something really close to you, right? And those are the things that are the most meaningful and often come out the best, right? Because I've put so much work into this, as I mean most artists put so much work into anything they make. But the commissioners were the Icelandic Festival of Manitoba, and they've been community members that I've known for my whole life. And they said, we want to commission some work, and I said, yeah, great, awesome. And they said, yeah, maybe the symphony will do it. And I'm like, yeah, in my dreams, that'd be great. And then it happened. And they said, yeah, so we've talked to the symphony and we're going to go ahead with it. And then there's kind of that moment of excitement and then panic of like, oh boy, now you got to really bring your A game. And I'm really proud of Morgun. It's a really representative work, but it really pushed me, and I'm really excited to share it with everybody. I thought about the big story of the Icelandic immigrants. I thought about the direct story about them leaving Iceland and going through Ontario and Minnesota, North Dakota, and coming through Manitoba. They were actually supposed to go further north, but a big storm kind of crashed on them as they came through Gimli, and the captain had to cut the barges they were sailing on because it was just they weren't going to make it. So then the barges drifted to Willow Island, and that's Gimli. So it was supposed to be further north. But the more that I thought about it, the more that I realized it was an emotional story about immigrating, about leaving home, and about leaving home for a place that was very unknown, not only to them, but to a lot of people in the world. I mean, Canada was very young in 1875, and so it was. I really tried to frame it around like loss, the loss of your home and the gaining of a new home, kind of the idea of moving forward while always looking back. Is my home going to be better or worse than the Iceland I'm leaving behind? Because Iceland at that time had been suffering from a sheep epidemic, and sheep is something that they based their economy on. There was a volcanic eruption that contaminated a lot of the soil. Like Iceland was really in a bad place in the 1870s, and it was scary. I mean, they left home knowing they were never going to come back, and hopefully Canada's going to be great. And I got to tell you, it wasn't so great those first few years. Between smallpox epidemic, having all the wrong sizes of nets because they're of course fishing in the ocean, and now they're fishing in the lakes. They couldn't catch anything, and so the First Nations people helped them through a lot of it. Because, of course, the Icelanders just weren't equipped to live on the prairies. And of course they weren't. But we made it through several waves of immigration. New Iceland survived.
Well, if all of that is wrapped into that piece of music, it's going to be incredible.
Thank you.
And congratulations on that. It's a real honor to have a piece premiered by the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. And if it's anything like we heard in the very short intro, about a minute and a half there, it sounds beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm excited to hear the whole thing. And before we leave, I'm going to play another work of yours, one short work. It's called Prairie Wedding. Do you want to quickly intro that one, and we'll...
Absolutely. Yeah. I submitted it for the Canadian Bands Association's composition competition in 2012. It got an honorable mention, and it's published by Den Publications in Wisconsin. It's for concert band, and I got married that year, which was really great. So I thought, it's time to write something about getting married. Everyone loves weddings, and so it starts in anticipation of the ceremony, and halfway through we start to get to the party, and it's very folky and prairie and I really like it. I'm excited to share it with you.
Well, let's have a listen. Kenley, thank you for coming in this morning. Just have a fun weekend, Really enjoy it, take it all in, and hey, we're proud.
Thank you so much for having me.
Proud of you here in Winnipeg. And in Gimli.
Appreciate that.
So let's have a listen. This is a work that Kenley Kristofferson wrote called Prairie Wedding. And again, I'll just quickly mention that his work called Morgun is going to be featured this weekend, tonight and tomorrow, with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra.